Good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting to order of Stratford City Council. Just adjust that there. The first item on the agenda is a call to order. The second item, I'll just tell everyone, in the council chamber with me is Deputy Clerk Chris Bantock, Clerk Tatjana Defoe, and Chief Administrative Officer Joan Thompson. There's a number of staff joining us online also. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll take an adjournment for an for a public meeting under item 3.1 with regard to zone change application Z06-20, official plan amendment application OPA 01-20 for 370 to 396 Ontario Street. So moved by Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Ritzma. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Item 3.1 at this time, representing the applicant, I believe, is Emily Elliott. I will read the meeting procedures, and the purpose of this meeting is to give council and the public an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to official plan amendment application OPA 01-20 and zoning bylaw amendment Z06-20. The application affects the property with the municipal addresses of 370 to 396 Ontario Street in the City of Stratford. The order of procedure for this meeting is as follows. Staff will present the application. The applicant or their agent will then make a presentation. Council may ask questions for the purposes of clarifying the submission, but are cautioned not to make comments nor take a position on this application at the public meeting. Registered delegations will be asked for their presentations, comments, and questions. Questions and comments from the Q&A section of the webinar will be read into the record by the clerk's office staff member, Jody Aikens. The public is advised that if a person has not provided counsel with oral submissions at a public meeting or written submissions before a bylaw is adopted or a decision is made, the local planning appeal tribunal has the power to dismiss an appeal. The public is also advised that comments expressed and written mail presented is a matter of public record for full disclosure. Are there any questions as to this order of procedure at this time? Seeing none, we'll now proceed with the meeting, and I'll invite forward staff, Manager of Planning, Alyssa Bridge, to present the application, and of course, Caroline Baker, the consulting planner for the city, and I'll turn it over to those two ladies at this time.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as you noted, this afternoon is a public meeting under the Planning Act for a proposed official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment for the properties municipally addressed as 370 to 396 Ontario Street. Ms. Caroline Baker is with us this afternoon, and she'll give the staff presentation on the proposed applications.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you for letting us have the opportunity to present. Just a question of clarification, if you'd prefer if I share my screen for the municipal presentation, or if clerks will be loading it up for viewing.
Through you, Your Worship. Ms. Baker, if you could kindly share your screen at this time, that would be greatly appreciated.
Of course. Okay, is the presentation visible to those viewing? Thumbs up. I see a few thumbs up. Great, thank you. As noted, the City of Stratford received an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application received from MHBC on behalf of Chancery Developments. The purpose of the application is to permit a 4-story, 36 dwelling units in a multi-unit building. And the application specifically are requesting that the site be redesignated from residential area to high density residential and rezoned from mixed use residential and neighborhood commercial to a site specific residential 5th density with provisions for minimum lot frontage, maximum lot coverage, minimum landscape open space, and minimum setback from the Ontario Street frontage. In support of the applications, the applicant filed a planning justification report and a functional servicing report. This slide provides an aerial view of the property, which you can see runs the entire frontage of Ontario Street between Trow Avenue and Queen Street. The site is 1.09 acres in size and does contain 3 existing dwellings, as well as the former restaurant known as the Golden Bamboo. Here are a few site photos demonstrating the frontages along Queen, Ontario, and Trow, as well as the existing buildings on the property. The applicant has submitted a conceptual development plan for the site as part of their applications. And while there is a lot of detail to digest on one page, but what you will see is the proposed buildings with the 36 units, the 61 parking spaces, which are in a combination of open, unstructured parking, as well as structured parking. They've delineated the snow storage, garbage, as well as the loading and the amenity area. As noted, the site is designated a residential area, which permits low and medium density uses, subject to evaluation criteria for those more medium density uses. Permitted uses include single dwelling, semi-detached, duplex, triplex, townhouse dwelling, and low-rise apartments with a maximum density of 65 units per hectare and a maximum building height of 3 stories. As noted, they are requesting the site be redesignated to high-density residential, which would permit a range of uses, including apartment buildings, with a maximum of 100 units per hectare and a maximum building height of 6 stories. The site is zoned mixed-use residential, as well as the corner at Ontario and Queen Street has a commercial C1 zoning. These zones do permit a 2-unit dwelling, as well as a range of neighborhood-serving commercial uses, provided a maximum building height of 10 meters is complied with. To date, there have been comments received through the circulation to members of the public, and I understand there are some that have requested to speak today at the public meeting. The purpose of this slide is to provide a summary, general nature of the comments received. They relate to building design, scale, height, and separation, as well as shadow impacts, the potential for rental units, concern about the location of garbage areas and sufficient snow storage area, traffic impacts and overflow parking, impact on privacy to the surrounding residential uses, lack of green space, compliance with the city's OP policies, impact on the heritage area and the significance of the Ontario Street corridor, absence of commercial uses within the development, environmental impacts of demolishing existing buildings and housing, potential financial impact on the city, and the timing of the statutory public meeting during the COVID-19 pandemic. The city has also circulated the necessary city departments and agencies. At this point, the city has received 2 responding comments, first being from the building department that a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment will be required prior to planning approvals. And the second is from engineering services, indicating they would like to see a solution for maintaining sanitary service to 33 Trow Avenue. Just as a bit of background, currently there's 1 lateral for the property at Trow in Ontario on the site that then connects to 33 Trow, and the city is essentially looking for a solution to maintain the servicing. Just wanted to provide a bit of summary in terms of next steps for council and those members of the public that are on the call today. City will receive feedback today through the statutory public meeting. The city will be looking to obtain the circulation comments from city departments and various agencies. And from there, staff will look to prepare a recommendation report that will be presented to a future Planning and Heritage Committee. And following the Planning and Heritage Committee recommendation to either support, defer, modify, or deny, council will decide on the applications. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or after the presentation on behalf of the applicant.
Are there any questions at this time from members of council? Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Yeah, just one quick question. You'd mentioned a 10-meter height being the standard for the current zoning. Can you tell me how many stories that would typically be?
Through the mayor, that would depend on the type of roof that would be proposed. The zoning bylaw measures building height from average finished grade. Generally, that is to contemplate either a 2.5 or a 3-story building. So if you think of a single detached with 2 stories and an attic, that might have an extra room. But if you went to a flat roof, you could potentially get 3 full stories, just depending on, again, roof pitch.
Okay, thank you.
You're muted, Dan.
Well, now, thank you very much, Ms. Baker. We'll now go on to hear from Emily Elliott, the agent on behalf of the applicant. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Elliott.
Good afternoon, Mayor Matheson and members of council. I had a glitch with my microphone. Good afternoon, Mayor Matheson and members of council. Apologies, I'm not sure if I can be heard at this moment.
Yes, you can.
Yes, okay, I'm getting some nods, thanks. I had a glitch with my microphone. My name is Emily Elliott, and I'm an associate with MHBC Planning, and MHBC is the applicant for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications related to this proposal. And I'd like to say thank you to Ms. Baker for providing an overview of the project, and that would now like to take this opportunity to provide some more details and discuss the design visions and objectives for this site. So I've prepared a presentation that's attached to the agenda. So as I move through my presentation this afternoon, I'll reference the page number so that everyone can refer to the visuals we have prepared. So the presentation begins on page 57 with a rendering of the proposal. And if you're viewing the agenda as a PDF, it's page 60. This page also indicates that the project team includes the property owner, Chance Redevelopment Limited, and the architect, James Douglas, and IBI Group was retained for the engineering. So moving on to page 58, this page shows the location of the property, which Ms. Baker did review. So the site is comprised of 5 lots located along Ontario Street between Trow Avenue and Queen Street with frontage on each street. Presently, the site features 3 houses, a vacant lot, and a commercial building. Page 59 shows the location of the property in its context. So the site's located in an area characterized by a broad range of uses, including commercial, residential, and institutional uses along Ontario Street and residential uses to the north and south. It's also very close to downtown, less than 500 meters to the west end of the east end of downtown. The Avon River, Parkland, and the Festival Theatre are all located about 400 meters to the north, which gives the site excellent access to recreational areas. Given the range of uses in the area, the site is considered to be in a very walkable part of the city, and it also has good access to existing transit with 2 bus stops located adjacent to the site on Ontario at Queen, and these stops provide access to the downtown, the north end, and the east end of the city. Page 60 is the next slide, and it provides information on the development vision for the site and some of the key design considerations. So I'll start with a description of the project. So the proposal is 4 stories with 2-story elements facing Trow and Queen Street. The building is designed to have 36 units, which results in a density of 96 units per hectare. Introduction of apartment units at this location will contribute to the range of housing types in this area. Oh, thank you. This presentation is now on the screen. There's also an indoor amenity area on the ground floor for the portion of the building that fronts onto Trow Avenue. So the next page 61, shows the proposed development in the context of the surrounding area. So you can see there's a large setback from the proposal to the homes fronting on Coburg Street. The setback is a minimum of 15 meters. The building has also been designed to minimize the visual impact of the parking on the streetscape through locating it to the rear of the site and internal to the building within the first story. The building has also been designed to incorporate separate pedestrian walkways from the sidewalk to the building at each of its entrances. Those are shown in brown on the image. It's also noted that this part of Queen Street has a range of, in its built form character. The lots immediately to the east and west contain relatively new commercial buildings that are set back from the street with large surface parking areas between the buildings and Ontario Street. This site has a large vacant lot and unused commercial buildings. As I'll discuss further and illustrate on the visuals, the proposed development has been designed to be in keeping with the character of Ontario Street, particularly along the south sides of this segment. There's also a 5-meter wide road widening on Ontario Street for the future, it's a 5-meter wide dedication for the future widening of Ontario Street that this design respects. So the next page, page 62, shows a rendering of this development. So as I mentioned, there's a 2-story element with an individual pedestrian entrance on the Queen Street frontage and 4 stories for the mid-central part of the building. There are large bay windows facing the street on both Queen and Ontario Street, which will animate the streetscape. There's a peaked roof line that mimics the rhythm of the roof lines along the south side of Ontario Street and a consistent setback along Ontario Street, similar to setbacks across the street. The building has also been designed with projections and recesses to break up the massing and landscaping opportunities on all frontages. Slide 63, or page 63, is another rendering of the building, which shows the 2-story element facing Trow. This component has a large, clearly defined entrance and has been designed in consideration of adjacent 2-story home. The rendering shows that the building will be constructed with high-quality materials that are reflective of the surrounding context. The proposal will also provide support for downtown through the introduction of new units within walking distance. Page 64 kind of just goes through some of these architectural and urban design objectives that I've just spoken to, so we can just skip over that. And page 65 includes the summary of the intent of the applications with which Ms. Baker provided an overview of. So as she mentioned, the proposal seeks to redesignate the site high-density residential, which permits apartments to a maximum height of 6 stories and 100 units per hectare. As I've mentioned a couple times now, this proposal is only for 4 stories, with some elements transitioning to 2 stories. The zoning bylaw amendment seeks to implement the official plan amendment with some site-specific provisions. The first is related to the corner lot frontage, and this provision is required because Trow Ave is technically considered to be the front lot line by the zoning bylaw, but despite this, the building's been designed to orient towards Ontario Street while recognizing the flankage yards. The second provision is to request an exterior side yard depth of 3 meters. That applies to Ontario Street, and it allows the building to be oriented towards the street while recognizing the 5-meter land dedication on Ontario Street. So functionally, the building will be set back 8 meters. The coverage and landscape open space provisions are requested to facilitate the efficient development of the land with an apartment building that features structured parking. We also included a site-specific provision to recognize the parking spaces set out in the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act that are not in the current zoning bylaw. Moving on to page 66. This is a summary of the applicable planning framework that applies to the site and the development. So the site is located in a built-up area of the City of Stratford. Provincial policy directs development to the built-up area through intensification and compact built form. Intensification includes development of a site at a higher density, including through the development of vacant and underutilized lots in developed areas. The provincial policy statement also encourages intensification proximate to transit, cost-effective development that minimizes land consumption and servicing costs. The proposal makes efficient use of land and utilizes existing infrastructure and benefits from and supports existing transit. It's located in an appropriate location for intensification as it contains both a vacant lot and a vacant building. Presently, the site is designated residential by the city's official plan and subject to Special Policy Area 2. The official plan contains policies related to intensification and high-density residential areas, which this proposal addresses. Specifically, the official plan has an intensification target of 25%. This means 25% of new residential growth is to be within the belt boundary of the city. The official plan also has a housing mix target that includes 30% of housing as high density. Criteria for new high-density residential areas are also set out in the official plan, which this proposal addresses. Specifically, the proposal makes use of underutilized lands. The site is located on an arterial road. It's in a highly walkable mixed-use area where future residents will be able to walk to a variety of locations, including downtown. It has excellent access to public transit facilities, which allow future residents convenient access to a range of destinations in the city, and it has been designed in consideration of compatibility with the surrounding area and has access to existing municipal services. Page 67 includes a list of the documents and reports that were submitted in support of the application. These reports were identified through the pre-consultation we had with staff back in April of 2020. The application included the concept plan and vision, which were the renderings we presented, planning justification report, functional servicing report, existing conditions, grading and servicing plan. And we also submitted a sun and shadow study to demonstrate shadow impacts as an appendix to the planning report. And all documents are publicly available through the planning department, should anyone wish to view them. And finally, page 68 provides a conclusion to this presentation. So in summary, the proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement and assists the city in achieving its intensification target of 25% of residential growth in the built boundary and the city's housing mix target of 30% being high density. It addresses the criteria associated with locations for high density residential areas and is an opportunity for an intensification at an appropriate location as it's an underutilized site within the built boundary in a mixed use area that's walking distance to downtown and recreational uses. The site's located on arterial road and is supported by transit. It will provide support for nearby non-residential uses, including downtown, and result in the introduction of a new form of housing to this area. It has a compact built form that's been designed to address compatibility and the character of Ontario Street, and it can be serviced adequately by existing services. So we're very interested to hear feedback, and we'll consider any responses or everything we hear tonight through the resubmission of the application. And I will try to respond to as many questions as I can from council tonight. And if I don't have a response, we will consider it through staff as part of the resubmission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elliott. I will ask members of council at this time if they have questions for either the applicant or the staff member. Councillor Henderson.
Are these units going to be made accessible at all? And also, I'm not sure, somebody had mentioned they might be condos. I'm just wondering if they're condos or apartments. I'm just wondering how affordable, and I'm not sure if you're at that stage yet, how affordable they'll be.
Okay, through you, Mayor Matheson, thank you for your question. So in terms of affordability, the units are intended to be market rate. That said, apartments do tend to be more single detached dwellings. And in terms of tenure, whether it will be a apartment or condo or rental, that has not yet been determined. It will be determined at the future submission point. And in terms of accessibility, it's intended that this development will contain more accessible units than are required by the building code.
So will there be an elevator?
I believe there is an elevator.
I just wanted to make sure there was no steps.
Yes, apologies. Yes, there is an elevator. I wanted to be certain of that before I responded.
Yeah, I think anything over 2 stories has one nowadays, but and just to get into the apartments, it's ground floor, like there's no steps to get into it?
Yes, that's correct.
And any other member of council having a question at this time? Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is more of a question for our staff member. In looking at the plan view of this project, it shows it being set back. Like you look at the Domino's and the UPS store, which are both relatively new buildings, the setback for this building seems to be a lot closer to the street than those two do. Have we changed our setback requirements since those 2 buildings were built?
Through the mayor, through the application, they are requesting a reduction to the yard setback to Ontario Street. And in combination, as noted by Ms. Elliott, there is a 5-meter required road widening along Ontario Street. And that will certainly be a component of the application that will be assessed by planning staff through their staff report in the future.
Thank you.
Any other member of council this time having a question? Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there any other property along Ontario Street that has the height of the proposed development?
Through the mayor, city staff can speak to that. The one that would come to mind, but further down, would be Arden Park, at the corner of Romeo and Ontario, in terms of a height greater than 2 or 3 stories. I believe you then have to move westerly on Ontario Street to the downtown. I believe above the commercial shops on the north side, there is a 4-story apartment building.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Just to follow up then. So would it be about the same height as the, I believe they're condos beside the Knox Church there, you know, offhand? Would that be about the same height? I think they're 4 stories, or are they 5? I'm not sure.
The Stratford Place, it is a 4-story apartment building.
So it'll be about that height. Okay. I guess I had one more question. So I was a bit confused on the drawing. Is there a 36 unit apartment building and then a triplex on the one corner and 2 units on the other corner? Am I reading that right?
Through the mayor, based on their drawings, and I'll let Ms. Elliott further elaborate, but it appears that it is all one structure. You'll see on the drawings, there's an amenity area label on Troe Avenue, and then there's a link that connects to the main building. Based on the concepts, it does look like one overall building, but maybe Ms. Elliott can speak further to the design intent.
Yes, through the mayor, that is an accurate description of the design intent. The building fronting row is amenity area and then 3 units above, and the amenity area is connected to the main building through the link that's shown. So it is one building connected by a link. So it is total of 36 units.
Thank you. My question would be for Mr. Delovic. How long have we had listed the 5-meter widening of Ontario Street? And if you could give us some of the background with regard to that.
Yeah, through your worship, but that would be in the official plan for road widenings. It's probably going back several years in the official plan for the ultimate widening. So when we have rezonings like this, or we take the opportunity to take those widenings at that time.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of council? Okay. At this time, I have a list of members of the public who had signed up to speak, and then we will then open it up for the chat line. Mr. Gary Annandale had submitted his name, and I believe the clerk's office will now bring Mr. Annandale into the conversation. So I'll wait for that. Mr. Annandale?
Yes, I'm here if everyone can hear me.
I believe so, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to speak at the meeting. I'd also like to thank the many people who submitted presentations by way of letters and emails to City Council concerning the change to the official plan and the zoning application, and all of these can be found in the agenda. Before I mention anything else, I would also note that under the Planning Stratford's zoning bylaw schedules, there are a number of maps that show permitted residential densities. Now, if this application we are considering was a question of trying to get increased residential density because there's a lack of higher density zoning, then maybe it would have some merit. But, excuse me, when one looks at the maps under Schedule A, you'll immediately notice that there are a significant number of R5 designated areas. Also, presumably the eastern gateway to the city has the option of R5 designated areas, as does the area around the Stratford Rotary Complex and Vivian Line, just to name a few of current developments. So, if I'm not mistaken, this is not an application driven by need. It's the appearance of the developer wanting to increase the density in order to increase profitability of the development. I would imagine that property taxes have increased pretty substantially by virtue of the new developments that have taken place within Stratford. So again, I don't believe adding a few extra units along 370 to 396 Ontario Street really is a concern for the city. In other words, I don't think this is about increasing revenue for the city either. A little bit of history of this area. The Golden Bamboo restaurant was owned by David Lee, and it was in operation in 1992 when Caroline, my wife, and I moved into this area. I understand that there was an agreement in the 1970s to expand this restaurant, which would have been from a 1.5-story dwelling to adding a single story of dining room to the building. But there was a problem here, and the setbacks don't appear to have been complied with at the time. And essentially, there was a huge mistake made by council at the time because there was insufficient parking. And to rectify the issue of parking, Mr. Lee purchased properties along Ontario Street that are currently vacant. And this was primarily to create parking. The buildings were demolished, as we can see. But this land was never really developed for parking. As everyone probably knows, anyone who parked in the area to go to the restaurant would have had to walk through mud when it rained. There were ruts and potholes in it. The ground was uneven. And so nothing was ever really done with it. Mr. Lee actually attempted to buy the property immediately west of the restaurant from Otto Vessels, who adamantly refused to sell the property. And so I guess the idea of having parking right next to the restaurant was never realized. And I would really ask City Council not to make another mistake in this area by approving the proposed change to the official plan and the zoning of the area. This is a stable residential neighborhood, and the residents of the area have been living in comfort of believing that the official plan was in place to preserve the area. As we're all aware, this area is also passed by many visitors to Stratford, and preserving the character of the neighborhood is important to the image that Stratford displays. Certainly no one enjoys walking past a derelict building, and the ambience walking from downtown past a 4-story building that is out of character with its surroundings is also not conducive to Stratford's experience. So I would suggest to council that this is not a minor variance that is being sought. It will have a huge impact on the area, excuse me, and create a precedent that other developers can use in the future to support changes to the official plan and zoning. Excuse me. In any event, the official plan has been in effect since the developer purchased the property. So the developer would have been well aware of the official plan requirements and the zoning. The updated official plan was adopted, as I believe, on December 14, 2015. And the developer purchased the property somewhere around that time. And as council will remember, in March 2017, the developer applied to several lots on Coburg Street that are now numbered 261 to 265. And in other words, there was the developer always knew what the requirements were, and as far as the current development is concerned, always knew that this would be out of line with the official plan. Excuse me. So within a stable residential area, the building height should not be more than 2 stories and I believe to a maximum of 3 stories. Those of us who attended the March 27 meeting and residents who purchased property in this area were always of the understanding that something akin to townhouses would be developed on the land. I believe everyone would be in favor of such a development as it would align with the neighborhood. It bears repeating that the that the official plan is an extensive document, and within it are a number of important sections, such as section 4.5.1, the goals and objectives for residential areas. And we notice that paragraph 1 says to maintain in all residential areas the essential neighborhood qualities of quiet enjoyment, privacy, upkeep, public health and safety, and basic municipal services. And paragraph 2, to ensure that where intensification of a development is proposed in residential areas, it is compatible in terms of scale, density, and design with neighboring development, and adheres to sound planning principles relating to servicing, traffic, site design, etc. Also within the official plan regarding stable residential areas is stated, stable residential areas are residential areas where potential new development or redevelopment is limited. Any intensification will be modest and incremental, occurring through changes such as development of vacant lots, accessory apartments, or other forms of residential housing that meet the criteria below in the plan. Application for new development in such areas shall be evaluated based on their ability to generally maintain the following elements of the structure and character of the immediate surrounding areas. Number 1, scale of development respects the height, massing, and density of adjacent buildings and is appropriate for the site. Respects the nature of the streetscape as defined by such elements as landscaped areas and the relationship between public street, front yards, and primary entrances to buildings. And siting of buildings in relation to abutting properties ensures there will be no significant negative impacts with respect to privacy, and shadowing and appropriate buffering can be provided. I'll notice as well that heritage conservation of the area is not yet addressed and presumably will be at a point in the future. When we look at recent higher-rise developments, and notably along Oxford Road, John Street, and Lawn Avenue, these developments are significantly differentiated from the proposed development in a number of ways. These areas were not considered a stable residential area. The setbacks as they exist now on these developments are considerably greater than the proposed development of Ontario Street. We can also differentiate these because they were developed on a former factory land, a school with, as I understand it, much the same height as the current building on John Street, in an area that was essentially bush. And all of these developments have open space, which is conspicuously lacking in the Chancery development proposal. The agenda did contain some photographs of the area, but they don't really show the scale of the proposed property. I myself have, although I'm not a photographer, and certainly I could not show the scale in perspective correctly, but I did provide some photographs to council, and I'm not sure if you have them available to you right now. But number 1, I took a picture of a nighttime scene. Not only will there be lights from 36 units, but also exterior security lighting, parking lot lighting, and vehicles entering and exiting the areas. So you can see there will be a significant change to the area. Slide number 2, you can see that the view will be entirely building, as the home at 388 Ontario Street, which is what is viewed in the picture, will be replaced with a building twice as high and running from Queen Street to Trow Avenue. Number 3, there is a view from the side of my property. You can see how close the proposed building will be to the residences on Coburg Street. And again, note that the proposed building will be twice as high if 4 stories are permitted. Number 4 is taken from 380 Ontario Street, the addition at the back of that building, and looks back towards Coburg Street. Again, you will see how close this building is to my residence, and the impact of a 4-story building here will be huge. The 5th is taken from Coburg Street towards Ontario Street. Again, I emphasize the close proximity of the buildings and the fact that the height of the proposed building will be twice as high as the existing red brick building. Matter of fact, at around 2 o'clock this afternoon, I took a look outside my studio window at the back of my residence, and the sun would probably already be obscured by a 4-story building. So it will have a significant impact on sunshine on this area of Coburg Street. Number 6 is taken from the vacant land at 261 Coburg Street. Again, you'll see the close proximity of the dwellings and that the proposed building will be a solid mass that will loom above the residences on Coburg Street. And number 7 is taken again from the vacant land. You'll notice the proposed building will be twice the height of the red brick buildings on Ontario Street, and again will present a solid barrier from Queen Street to Crow Avenue, again looming over the Coburg Street dwellings. And again, at this time of the year, there's a significant shadow going to be cast by those by that 4-story building. So in our opinion, the proposed building does not, in accordance with the official plan, maintain the elements of the structure and character of the immediate surrounding residential area. It does not conform to the scale of the height, mass, and density of adjacent buildings. It doesn't contain any or sufficient open space to comply with zoning requirements, and we don't consider this to be appropriate for the site. The fact that the Festival Theatre is some 400 meters away doesn't really jive for recreation, I think, of residents. You would expect there to be some open space that they could access within the property. As I understand it, within an R5 bracket 1 zone, a minimum of 30% of the land must be landscaped open space. And this is required to ensure that green space and amenity areas are provided. In addition, the zoning bylaw requires lots within residential 5th density R5 zone to provide a planting strip where subject lands abut a lot in another residential zone. You will see that essentially there's a proposal for a 6-foot high wall to go up, a fence to go up. But the parking essentially of all of those vehicles is right next to the fence line of the Coburg Street properties. There's also garbage by way of Moloch, I believe it is. To extract that garbage requires a truck with a crane attachment that will then have to spend some time hooking up to the garbage, hauling it out of the ground, dumping it into the truck, putting the container back into the ground. So this is going to increase significantly the noise of garbage removal in the area. So again, you'll notice the site plan submitted has the entire area practically consumed by building and asphalt paving. As I mentioned, the parking abuts against the fence line of 273 and 277 Coburg Street. The tiny strip of landscaping behind 265 and 269 Coburg Street is literally a matter of a couple of feet wide. And once that couple of feet is transversed, you're into parking again. There's insufficient landscaping or open space provided. So again, Mr. Mayor and councillors, should you approve this application, you'll be setting a precedent. There will then be nothing to stop anyone in the future from buying up dwellings in any stable residential area over time, and then applying for zoning change such that some high-rise building can be developed. The current application, in our view, should not be permitted, as there's no need for development of that scale in our area. And in our view, the city should not be approving development so that a developer can maximize its profit. In 2017, residents again were led to believe that the development would be along the lines of townhomes. People again who recently purchased were under that same impression. And we would submit that the developer should develop the property within the confines of the official plan. And if the return on investment is inadequate by virtue of conforming to the official plan, it's not council's obligation to change the official plan and zoning to allow the developers to achieve the desired return on investment. I hope that wasn't too long. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Annandale. Is there any questions for Mr. Annandale from members of council at this time? Okay, thank you. We have Laura Lind listed to speak next. Ms. Lind, if you're on the line, if you could identify, I believe the clerk's office has seen that. Yes, thank you.
Hi, it's actually, my name's Laurie Lind, and it's Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I apologize.
Worries, I get that all the time. Good afternoon, Mayor Matheson and members of council. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you. I live at 127 Queen Street, so just sort of kitty corner from where the proposed building will be. And my concern is different from the previous speaker. While I share many of his concerns, and I'm very mixed about the possibility of this building being there, my main concern is on the traffic front, because as you all well know, when the festival is in operation, Queen Street is the major exit from the festival theater. And so for, you know, up to half an hour, 4 times a day, that street and that block in particular, Queen between Ontario and Coburg, is backed up with traffic. And now there's going to be a building that is adding 61 parking spaces, and the only exit is on Queen Street. So my concern is that if this building is approved, I think it's essential that you install a traffic light at the intersection of Ontario and Queen. And that's my concern. And I wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lind. Any question for Mr. Lind? Seeing none, our next listed speaker are Chris and Sandra Schultes. Are Chris and Sandra on the line, or one of them?
Through the chair, I do not have Chris or Sandra on the line at this time, so I will move on to Robert Ritz.
Thank you. Mr. Schultes or Mrs. Schultes comes on, we can come back to them. Mr. Ritz.
Good afternoon, Council and Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. Clerk's office should have given you a slide presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so I'm going to go through it. I'm going to skip some slides for sake of time and get to some key points. For me, this is more a big picture aspect than a citizen that lives near the property. For me, it's the image of Stratford and how Stratford would change with this type of building or future buildings like this along our heritage corridor. So with the first slide, this 4-story development proposed for this Ontario Street block from Trode to Queen compromises a unique feature that is an element of Stratford's urban design. Intact residential corridors extending along our main streets from the perimeter, commercial areas to the downtown core. Most cities' main streets have had intermittent commercial development. We've seen it in Waterloo and London occur over the years, breaking up the residential fabric that once existed along these streets. Stratford's been very fortunate that such commercial development has been limited to the gas stations that were developed there during the 30s. In Stratford, where the gas stations have left, these sites have uses such as a pizzeria, Domino's, business store, UPS, medical clinic on Huron Street. So important is this element that is actually identified in the official plan as a heritage corridor. Characteristics of these corridors exist on all main streets leading into the city, but they are specifically noted on the official plan on parts of Ontario, Huron, and Erie Streets. So what happens here could also happen on those 2 streets as well. So looking at the development, the proposed development does not appear to reflect the broader concepts of the official plan. In fact, almost appears to contradict these concepts of what the official plan is trying to achieve. As earlier mentioned, citizens adjacent to the proposed development, especially those on the north side that share a boundary with it, expect the official plan not to change. They expect the official plan to prevent the introduction of uses detrimental to established and desired residential and heritage characters of this area that currently exists along Ontario Street, Huron Street, and parts of Erie Street. They expect the official plan to be followed. I'm going to skip the purpose of the official plan on 3, go to 4. The decision for the official plan amendment to redesignate the property from residential area to high-density residential area will be a planning precedent for any other development on a site with similar zoning and location as 370, 396 Ontario Street. Under the official plan, it's a residential area located in a heritage area on a heritage corridor. Whatever's approved for this site will also apply to any site that is a residential area located in a heritage area on a heritage corridor. In addition to Ontario Street from Romeo to Nile, areas of the city that are residential area located in a heritage area on a heritage corridor are parts of Huron Street from Mornington to John and parts of Erie from Cambria to St. David. The official plan has goals, objectives, and policies to guide the planning department and council to manage new development, infill, and the degree of intensification. If the amendment to the official plan does not follow the prescribed goals, objectives, and policies, then they should be amended or removed. The rules have been put there for a reason. The integrity of the official plan is compromised if the goals, objectives, and policies of the official plan are not followed. Now, there's excerpts from the official plan with respect to intensification, infilling, and heritage areas, goals and objectives for residential areas, policies for stable residential areas that are applicable to development in a heritage area located on a heritage corridor. Intensification. Permit limited intensification in residential areas of scale and built form which reflects the surrounding area, subject to the criteria of stable residential areas. Infilling in heritage areas. In the heritage areas and the heritage corridors, the city will ensure where infilling is proposed or municipal services installed or upgraded, the inherent heritage qualities of the area corridor will be retained, restored, and ideally enhanced. Goals and objectives for residential areas to ensure intensification of development is proposed in residential areas is compatible in terms of scale, density, and design with neighboring development and adheres to sound planning principles. Now, 453 are the policies of the official plan. Take a look at those. Now, to determine if what is being proposed is detrimental to the established and desired residential heritage character of these areas, I requested additional drawings on January 4th. I figured a contextual site elevation or street view with heights noted, as the street is now with the proposed building superimposed, including 3 properties on each side of the development, would illustrate the contextual impact of this project. And with drawings that are properly drawn and not sketches, that they're accurate and not comical. I did not receive such drawings until this morning. This really isn't acceptable. It's sort of hard to give a bounce back on something you get at 9 o'clock. Since I did not have the drawings of the proposed structure, I developed my own illustrations based on what I received to date. 4-story building set 7.5 meters back is the way it appeared on drawing. I know it's now 8 meters from the current front lot line, but the key point is that it's only 2.5 meters from the revised front line after the 5-meter road widening is assumed by the city. In most projects that I'm involved with in this city, when the municipality takes the 5 meters, the 7.5 meters begins at that line, not from where the old line was. So the buildings are pushed further back, such as the Arden Park, okay, such as the little dental office at Gordon, Ontario Street. What is illustrated is, so in the following drawings, what is illustrated is not currently what's proposed. However, it is what could be developed based on the proposed changes to the official plan and the zoning bylaw. And so now we have slides. This page 8. This is the one end of the property. The chimney on this building is about the height of a 4-story building. If you want to do a drive-by, you can start to work it. The reason the chimney looks smaller, it's in background, and so to pull it forward would be about the height where I noted it. And this is the lot. Key point here is there were 3 lots at one point in history along there, each with houses on these lots. And as you scroll across to 11, again, you can see where the 2 houses are. They're set further back than where this new building will be. And even the old Golden Bamboo, the original house, is set back in line with the red houses. And so this is showing how close it'll be to the street. And from the Trow Ave end, you can see here it's showing the 4 stories. I noted their illustration notes it at 2 stories, which is about the height of the existing building. But again, it's much closer to the neighboring house on Trow Avenue, which is a bit of an assault on that little house. This is showing a massing model. If you did build it 4 stories up and straight back, the only thing that's creating the articulated shape that's being proposed is the site plan agreement. But once you approve the zoning of R5, this could be anything, much like what happened at Avon School. That started out as a retirement home that was 2 stories high. Neighbors thought it was great. Once it was R5, it could become a 5-story building. And in fact, if the official plan changes, it can go to a 6-story building. This is looking at it from the other end at Domino's. And the scale and mass of this large 4-story structure does not comply with the official plan 358, infilling in heritage areas and heritage corridors. The city will ensure that when infilling is proposed, the inherent and heritage quality area corridor will be retained, restored, and ideally enhanced. This does not look like what we currently see on Ontario Street. This is showing a contextual site plan. So it's all the little blocks of houses, the footprints of them in the area. The property in question is right in the middle of that between Trow and Queen. And that's showing the proposed development. If you'll go back and forth on slides 16 and 17, you can see it's changing a little bit. This is showing the long block. This is showing from King Street to Nile Street, so more or less the heritage corridor of Ontario Street. And if you go to slide 19, you see the proposed development. Then, if this is approved, then what stops somebody else like Robert Ritz from acquiring buildings along his block and doing something similar? So we're showing on the opposite side of the street 3 more developments. And then in slide 21, a few more. Ontario Street as we know it, it's gone. It's just a line of apartment buildings. And finally, the rest of the blocks developed because the rest of it has, much like portions of Yonge Street in Toronto, where you have these walls of buildings on each side of the street. And the example that we have in this city right now, as mentioned by Gary Annandale, is Oxford Street. There's an example of 4-story buildings on each side of the street. Now, the one in the foreground on the left is 3 stories, but beyond that, you have 4 stories on each side of the street, and that gives you an idea of what the height's going to be like if this is proposed for Ontario Street. Is this what we want the heritage corridor of Ontario Street to look like? And then the remaining slides are showing you what this street looks like, which is a far cry of what's on Oxford Street, and a far cry of what's being proposed by this developer. Okay, so final slide 30. Do not amend the official plan. It's there for a reason. For the preservation of the heritage corridor, any development in this site should conform to the official plan in filling in heritage areas. In the heritage areas and in the heritage corridors, the city will ensure that the inherent heritage qualities of the area or corridor will be retained, restored, and ideally enhanced. I have other comments, but that's for another time on the detail of this particular project. I question the accuracy of the illustrations. It should be done in something like a Revit program or even an AutoCAD program to be more accurate with the heights and positioning. My sketches are the best based on, and it was just drawn on the photo. And as a designer for developers, we generally have to show fairly accurate drawings in the 3rd dimension, especially when it is such an assault on a street with this residential fabric as Ontario Street. That's it, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ritz. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Ritz? All right, thank you. Next on our list is Miss Debra Hansen from 265 Coburg Street. Oh, Councillor Henderson, sorry.
I just want to ask staff if they could add Mr. Ritz's PowerPoint to the website, so people could see them, because you can. We have a copy of it, but people that are watching don't have a copy. Thanks.
The clerk.
Through the chair, I do not have Debra Hansen on the line, but I do have Chris and/or Sandra Schultes.
Through you, your worship, as of January 1st, the city is required that any information posted to our website be accessible. There are some exclusions, so we will just review that prior to uploading the PowerPoint presentation. If someone would like a copy, they are always welcome to contact clerks@stratford.ca, and we could always provide them a copy that way.
Thank you.
Sandra Schultes here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak. I just have a few things to add. We definitely agree with everything, all the concerns that have been mentioned so far this afternoon, and I'll try not to duplicate anything, so I'll try to go through our list very quickly. It wasn't clear if there's going to be balconies or not on the building that's being proposed. We have concerns with regards to disturbing sounds. As Gary mentioned, there's not going to be space for any greenery, any gardens, trees to filter noise. There's just going to be a 6-foot fence, so vehicles arriving late at night are going to disturb us. If there's balconies, there'll be people possibly entertaining on their balconies. Again, you know, late into the evening, that'll be disturbing for us. More units is going to be more construction that's required, which will result in long-term consistent operation of heavy equipment in our residential area, which again will be very disturbing. We have concerns with regards to the mature trees. They haven't been incorporated into the plans, nor is there space to be plant additional trees that are similar, which is going to result in poor air quality and air pollution in the area. The garbage, exterior in-ground garbage that's being proposed, we actually have, our daughter lived in an apartment in Kitchener that had a similar garbage setup. And what happened, what we found was the garbage, it wasn't easy because you didn't have the garbage chutes on the floors. You actually had to drag the garbage down to the parking lot area, which resulted in not being able to easily recycle, and more items ending up in the landfill, which was very disturbing to see as well. We would notice that the garbage bins would overflow from time to time, or people wouldn't shut the lid. As well, it's not very accessible. So that would potentially result in rodents, smells, that sort of thing from that system. There's also a large transformer that's in the plans, and we have concerns about possible electric AC fields because of it being under voltage, and AC magnetic fields because of the currents running through them, which would be potential radiation exposure to the residents that live nearby that could negatively affect our health. Gary mentioned the shade from the building. I totally agree with that. It's, you know, going to reduce our enjoyment of our backyard. But in addition to that, it's going to negatively affect our gardens, our grass, our trees because of insufficient sunlight. Smells, the parking lot is not very big. It's mostly just parking. And from the entrance, I have a concern that smokers will be using the parking lot for smoking, and it'll be very close to our backyards. So, you know, we'd be exposed potentially to secondhand smoke, in addition to the exhaust from the cars being parked very close to our yards. The parking lot as well, when I look at it, it doesn't have a flow through. So I have to wonder about emergency vehicles. If there's a fire, some big emergency in the building, which requires a lot of emergency vehicles. If you have fire trucks and then ambulances arrive, to me, it looks like they're going to have, if the parking lot's full, that the emergency vehicles are going to have to reverse out to let others in. And it just looks like it could potentially be a real mess. Balconies, again, we're not too sure if there's going to be balconies or not on this new building. If there is, there doesn't appear to be a lot of storage that's set out in the building, which could potentially result in people using their balconies for storage of items and be an eyesore for the neighbors. And as well, I have a concern over Airbnb usage, short-term usage of the properties for Airbnb, again, would be really disruptive to the neighborhood. I know that Niagara-on-the-Lake has a real problem with that. In addition, I talked to somebody that lives in Niagara-on-the-Lake that recently had similar construction in their backyard. And one thing they didn't realize until after everything was completed was that the lights at night from the parking lot lamps, as well as cars coming and going, shine in their bedroom, even with blinds, and results in them waking up in the middle of the night. It's very disturbing, they mentioned. And the last thing I wanted to mention was flooding. So we have a real concern about this construction and how it could potentially negatively impact our home. We already have some flooding issues, but with putting this new construction, we're concerned that it's going to further result in flooding in our basement. Gary mentioned, we do agree that, you know, when we bought the property, it was, we were told that it was going to be townhomes that were planned for the site. We do, you know, think it's a good idea to have new construction and replace what's there right now, which is kind of an eyesore. But to make it high density, we do not agree with that. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Schultes. Are there any questions from members of council? All right. At this time, I'll ask Ms. Aikens, are there any questions or comments in the chat box that need to be read into the record?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there have been no comments submitted through the question and answer feature in Zoom.
Okay. If there are any members of the public who are on now that would like to ask a question, if you could identify in the chat box, I'll have Ms. Aikens let us know, and she can we can introduce you through that way. If not at this time, are any members of council that have any questions for staff or staff planners or the applicant? Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, it was brought up about a traffic light on Queen and Ontario Street. Is there any plan for a traffic light on Queen in Ontario?
Your worship, there's no plans at this time for signals. We would have to look at it in the future. Traffic study at the intersection to see if it's warranted. It's very certain points of the day where there's issues, and most time there's a need for traffic signals. And we would have to go through assessment, and then we'd have to justifying the need of traffic signals.
Mr. Delovic, if you could turn off your camera and then try just turning your microphone back on and say that again. You were very digital in your response for some of us, I believe.
Okay, I'll try that again. Right now, there is no plans for any traffic signals at the at that intersection. We would have to do an intersection study. Is that we only have issues there when the theaters in play and they're exiting, and so it's justify signals for a few times a day. Highway.
Okay. If I think I have Mr. Delovic's answer, is that at this time there's not one planned. A traffic study could be used, and it is a connecting link highway. So it would be in conjunction with ministry guidelines and traffic counts. And I think that's what I picked up in both of those responses. Are there any other members of council having a question at this time? Okay, Ms. Atkins, is there anybody in the chat box to
through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gary Annandale has just commented that he is also representing Laura Martin, Vivian McDonald, Cam Colthorne, Vicky Spain, Mona Thomas, and Debra Hansen. So he is speaking on behalf of those residents as well.
Thank you. All right, is there any other question from members of council at this time? Any from any members of the public at this time? Ms. Atkins, is there anything else in the chat box you want to draw to our attention before I ask the applicant if they have any closing comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Robert Ritz has submitted a comment as follows. Any development on that site should require, number one, the curb walk that presently exists be replaced with a wide boulevard walk similar to the east side of Queen, so pedestrians are not on top of the road. Number two, a road widening on the west side of Queen to permit 2 southbound lanes with 1 turning right only and a left straight lane similar to Parkview. Number three, you could add to that a layaway lane on the east side for those picking up mail and the added post boxes for the residents of the proposed development. And lastly, number four, also the idea of assembling lots and demolishing buildings for a major development is in process in another part of town, and that is Larson's Daily Ave project. There, 5 houses were demolished and they were proposed where he proposed to replace the existing with buildings that conformed to the zoning bylaw. As that comment was fairly lengthy, I will cut and paste it and forward it to the planning staff for their information.
Thank you. All right, any other questions from members of council this time? If not, would the applicant, Ms. Elliott, would you like to say anything in closing? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Matheson, and thank you everyone for providing your comments. As one point of clarification, no, there will not be balconies on the northerly building elevation that would look onto the units along Coburg. A lot of the other concerns that were raised by residents relating to light and noise and the detailed building design, we will be required to go through a site plan approval process for this site, which staff will be involved with. So we will be looking at those details at that time. We also did do a shadow study that's available as part of the planning report that demonstrates that there are no significant shadow impacts, particularly in the spring and summer. We'll also be following up with planning staff to discuss the resubmission and what appropriate zoning bylaw regulations we could incorporate that might provide some level of comfort to what is being shown today and what is contemplated will be what is developed on the site. And in terms of the previous townhouse proposal that was mentioned, this was before I was involved in the project. However, I do understand that that proposal did not move forward. It would have had the same number of units as this one, and it would not have had as many units that were accessible. So those are my closing remarks, and thank you, Mayor Matheson and members of council.
Thank you. All right. At this time, City Council intends to consider this application at a future Planning and Heritage Committee meeting where members of council will have an opportunity for full discussion of the application after reviewing comments received from the public at this time. If anyone would like to receive further notice of this application, please email clerks@stratford.ca. A video of this meeting will be posted to the city's website. And prior to adjourning this public meeting, I would just like to draw to the attention of members of council on page 2 at the bottom and 3 of the agenda, there's a list of all the residents that have submitted comments with regard to this application. I will now declare the public meeting adjourned and will reconvene in council for the reading of the bylaw. And it's bylaw 4.1 is the confirmatory bylaw for this afternoon's proceedings. For the first and second reading, I would need a mover, and that's Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Burbach seconding. All those in favor? Opposed, if any. And third and final reading, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Gaffney moving third and final reading of the confirmatory bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed, if any. And that's carried. And then a motion to adjourn this afternoon's proceedings, Councillor Sebin and Councillor Bunting. All those in favor? Opposed, if any. That's carried. Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe.